Welcome back, everyone. I'm the BLG Gamer, and today is a very different kind of video than what I normally do. I initially didn't really expect to make any beginner guide type videos just because what I wanted to offer was things people missed in the game, not, introducing people to the system. But in my comment sections, I very typically get questions of people asking about the game, and more people are joining Pathfinder 2E by the day. So if you're one of my current viewers, you probably aren't going to really need to watch this episode, though if you could at least leave a like before you go, I'd really appreciate it. But if you're new to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I'm going to do my best to give you the bare minimum information necessary to play the game and play the game well. If you follow all the tips in this video, your parties will less likely to be overcome by enemies even of more difficult challenge ratings, as much of Pathfinder is based around pretty simple math, and using any of the tips I'm going to be giving you in this video are actually going to make the enemies easier than the game system is essentially intending for. So with all that out of the way, this is going to be my Pathfinder 2E beginner's guide. So let's begin at the beginning. Yeah, I said beginning like 4 times. Oh well, whatever. So, what do you need to know first about making your character? First off, do not make a character that is overly complicated. Start something simple. It doesn't mean that you need to necessarily keep up with this character. I recommend everyone do like a starter adventure, like the starter kit, for instance, which is really good. Just something that is a handful of sessions so you can get a grasp of the game. If you want to plan for a bigger, longer campaign, this is only going to be beneficial to you all, as the thing is, you want to be prepared for your longer run character. And you want to make sure that the playstyle that you're going for matches what you enjoy in these kind of games. So doing a beginner one-shot, 3-sessioner kind of thing is, I think, the best way to start the game and the best way to look at the classes. On top of that, there are some classes that I would say are just not good for beginners. Mostly Alchemist, Oracle, and the Thaumaturge. Some of the other ones do have a little bit more complexity, but these 3 specifically dive into a bunch of strange mechanics and don't really prepare you well for the game. There's something you can pick up after your beginning 3 sessions when you feel more confident in your selections. So first and foremost, whatever ancestry or background you pick, know that you are not going to suffer no matter what class you play. Most backgrounds give you access to a standard boost, one of like 2 options, and then a free boost in whatever attribute you're looking for. On top of that, they typically give you 2 skill proficiencies and a skill feat. Most skills and skill feats in this game, while good, you can easily select just through normal character generation, so picking a background that suits your story better is often better than honestly picking one for the stats, because the stats are pretty, mixable. As long as one of the 2 stats offered by the background is one that you want, that's all you really need to worry about. And for Ancestries, Paizo has released an official ruling that every ancestry, no matter which you select, can just select 2 free boosts with no drawbacks or anything. And you can even use this with the optional rule of optional drawbacks to give yourself essentially 3 boosts with 1 drawback. Now, for your first character, obviously, selecting an ancestry that suits what your playstyle is most important. Though, if I'm being honest, humans are probably the easiest to go with, as they give you some really good early level feats that you can use to tweak your build just a little bit more, but it's absolutely not necessary, and the power gain is very minimal. I promise you, no matter what ancestry you select, you're going to be just as good as any other member of the class that you're going to play, just due to how the game is fundamentally structured. Then, when it comes to picking a class, beyond the ones I mentioned might be a little bit too difficult, there are 2, technically 3 playstyles that you should be aware of. There are Marshals, who predominantly focus on single target damage using weapons and hitting the enemy with said weapons, and there are Spellcasters. Now, there's also the Kineticist that doesn't really belong in either category, and I kind of think it belongs to a video of its own. So if you're curious about the kineticist, you can check out the Why This Kineticist is Awesome video. I'll link up here in the corner. Let's just stick with the basics. Marshals, spellcasters. For marshals, your main target is to hit the enemy. So you're going to pick probably one of two stats, though it's different for classes like, say, the investigator or the inventor. It's either going to be strength or dex. Now, the investigator can use intelligence if they use a specific action, and the inventor can supplement their damage using intelligence. So even with the inventor, you probably want to pick either dexterity or strength. Now, strength is good for hard-hitting weapons, though they tend to be slower and you're only going to be making 1 to 2 attacks with said weapons, while finesse is good with range weapons and also lighter weapons that you're more likely to make multiple strikes with. So depending on what your particular preferences are when it comes to striking an enemy, that's what you want to go for. All of the spellcasters list at the beginning their key ability score, so you don't need to worry about anything else. That key ability score is going to predominantly play into how your spells work and is going to be your spell attacks and spell DCs. So that one attribute is going to be your major focus, with other attributes, of course, supplementing it like any other class. But unlike the fighter, for instance, who is on the front line and needs to worry about their constitution, maybe their dex a little bit if they want to have good reflex saving throws, it is a little bit more stat intensive on the martial side, though it comes with the benefit of being more powerful in single target events. So against bosses, martials tend to do a little bit better. Once you picked your playstyle, obviously you're going to invest into your attributes accordingly for your class, mostly focusing on your key ability score and any others that benefit your class. When you're looking at extra ability scores outside of what your class, keep some things in mind. Athletics is a powerful skill to use in combat. It uses some of the best combat maneuvers in the game, and it is based on strength. So even a more dexterous martial fighter might want to invest a little bit into strength to use these actions. Simultaneously, deception is a very powerful in-game skill that you can use to reduce the enemy's AC. This means that charisma is a really good secondary attribute for some kinds of characters. All in all, what I'm trying to say is, when you're making your character, don't focus solely on your 2-hit action. Add some extra supplementary stuff to mix into your turns, and you'll see a better benefit for you and your allies. Speaking on allies, Pathfinder 2e is a very teamwork-centered game. You will do better in combat using teamwork with your allies, making sure that each other are hitting better, hitting harder, and as well being safe from the enemy. And the best way to maintain a safety in the game is to kill your enemies faster, which I'm sure everyone is excited about. So let me give you guys some hints on how to easily take down even more powerful enemies. All right, so I'm going to give you an example so I can more appropriately show you how powerful teamwork is in the game. So let's assume that you're a level 1 fighter fighting a level 1 boggart scout. Now, a creature that is equal to your level is considered a moderate challenge. You're more than likely to succeed and not suffer much damage over the course of the combat. An overall, very common starting level of enemy for you in the game, though it can get a little dicey if there's more than one in a fight. Now, if it's one-on-one, I think the fighter still has a pretty good shot at taking down the boggart scout, as we can look at its stats here. The boggart scout has an AC of 16. That means that you need to get a 16 to hit the creature. A fighter typically starts off with expert proficiency with their weapon. Expert proficiency means that they add +4 plus their level and their key ability for whatever their strike is. If it's a melee strike, for a non-finesse weapon, it's going to use strength. And if it's a finesse weapon, they can choose either strength or dex. Let's assume that you made an optimized fighter who is going to start with 18 strength. This means that at level 1, you're going to add the, well, I shouldn't say 18 strength anymore. Actually, if you're watching this after the remaster, it's just going to be +4 as they're removing the stat or ability scores and just adding modifiers. So winding back a little bit, let's assume that you have a +4 to your strength. So +4 to your strength plus your level 1, meaning you have a total score of 5, plus your proficiency, which is 4, meaning that you start off the game with a very powerful +9 to hit. The Boggart Scout having a 16 AC means that all you need to do is roll a 7 or higher to hit the Boggart Scout. This means that more often than not, you're likely to hit the enemy and it shouldn't be much of a concern. Though, let's look at the map in the game. Map is the multi-attack penalty, which happens when you spend multiple actions to strike an enemy. Now, it's very simple. All you have to know is that for your first strike in the round, you have nothing to worry about. There's 0 penalty. On your second strike, though, it's going to be a -5, and if it's your third strike, it's going to be a whopping -10. Now, if you're using an agile weapon with a dex finesse style character, then the agile will remove 1 from each step. So it's going to be 0 for your first, 4 from your second, and 8 from your third. Now, there are other ways to modify that, but that's going a little bit too deep for the sake of this video. So our fighter here can run up to the Boggart Scout and strike it with their weapon. First time, they're more than likely to hit. But on their second strike, they -4 from the strike, meaning that you can just take a look at your math, which your normal +9 now becomes a +4. That's not very good, and that means you need to roll a 12 or higher to hit the Boggart with your second strike, meaning on your second strike, you're more than likely to miss more often than not. That is unfortunate, but there are ways to get around this, as I'll show you here. First of all, let's assume that you're flanking with your barbarian buddy. Your barbarian buddy just being on the opposite side of the creature, where you can draw a line from one side of the creature to the other side of the creature, means that you're flanking. Even if we're using a large creature, for instance, as I'll show here, you can see that even if you're a little bit off center from each other, as long as a line goes from one side and exits the other, this is still considered flanking, which makes the enemy off guard. Off guard is a condition that makes the enemy's AC go down by 2. For the sake of the Boggart Scout that we were fighting before, that -2 will reduce their AC down to 14. That means that the fighter's initial +9 to hit is going to be even more likely to strike, only needing to roll a 5 or higher. But Pathfinder 2nd Edition uses an additional rule and does criticals a little bit different. Pathfinder uses what's called levels of success, and what this does is if you succeed by a certain amount, not just by rolling a nat 20, you actually still get a crit success. In the case with strikes, as long as it's a 10 or over, and actually if it's in any situation, 10 over the DC, which in this case is the enemy's AC, then that means that you crit the enemy, dealing double your damage and applying any extra effects that come from criticals. So just by flanking the enemy here, you already make it not only more likely to hit, only needing to roll a 5 or higher, but if you roll a 15, which will give you a grand bonus of 24, that's 10 over the AC of the Boggart Scout, meaning that you crit. So you crit not just on a 20, but on a 15, 16, 17, 18, and 20. That is a massive crit chance, and all that needed to happen for this to work was just for your barbarian buddy to run around to the other side of the enemy here. And to be fair, when we're looking at just the standard fighter, you did have a higher than standard chance to crit. All you needed to do was roll a 17 or higher, meaning that you crit on a 17, 18, 19, and 20. In any regard, fighters have a really good chance of critting, which is why they're a favorite for many who like dealing damage in the game. Now, something that's important to mention as well is on your second strike, when you have that -5, the enemy's AC has been reduced by 2. So you can change the math a little bit and you can see that you only have now a -3 to hit the enemy rather than the -5 that you had before. Now, that being the case, it's very, very simple. If we look at the numbers just at base, if the enemy is currently at a 14 AC and you have a equivalently +4 to hit, if we're subtracting 5 for your second attack in our map, that means all you need to do is roll a 10 or higher to hit with your second strike, meaning that you have a 50-50 chance to strike the enemy on your second strike, which really isn't that bad and is very good. But we can do this even better. If, for instance, your barbarian buddy not only flanked the enemy, but then shouted at the enemy to demoralize them, then they get the frightened 1 condition if the barbarian succeeds their check. And now the enemy's AC has been reduced by 3. 2 for off guard, which is a circumstance penalty, and 1 for the frightened condition, which is a status penalty. Now, we'll get into different types of conditions in another video, but all you need to know is that when it comes to stacking bonuses or penalties, you cannot stack 2 of the same type. So you can't stack 2 circumstance penalties, nor can you stack 2 status penalties against an enemy. But you can stack a status penalty and a circumstance penalty. In this case, the enemy is both off guard and frightens. This makes the fighter even more likely to hit. As their first strike, they would only need to roll a 4 or higher or 14 or higher to crit. And on their second strike, they would just need to roll a 9 or higher. And in order to crit on their second strike, they could roll a 19 or a 20, meaning that they're even more likely to crit, or they're even likely to crit more on their second strike more than standard. Now you might be asking, okay, but why would the barbarian use an action to demoralize the enemy, possibly wasting damage? Well, most classes beyond the fighter don't have expert proficiency at level 1. Even a barbarian with the same amount of strength is only trained at level 1, meaning that they have a +7 where the fighter has a +9. So, for the sake of the team's benefit, the barbarian uses 1 action to stride behind the enemy, 1 action to demoralize the enemy, and then their last action to strike the enemy. What this does is it makes it more likely not only for themselves to crit with their 1 strike, but for the fighter to crit with their first and possibly even their second strike, which is a lot of damage. Not only that, but barbarians are more geared towards single hit damage, not needing to necessarily focus on multiple hits, as most barbarians deal a good amount of extra damage. Barbarians at level 1 with their rage effect typically do 4 additional damage on top of whatever damage they do with their weapon. Even if a barbarian and a fighter are using the same weapon with the same strength, the barbarian is dealing an average 4 more damage for at least the initial strike. So when the barbarian ran behind the enemy and intimidated the enemy, the barbarian increased their chance to hit that enemy by a significant amount. That +7 essentially became a +10, which is very good for the barbarian and made it much more likely to much more likely to crit the enemy. With the enemy having a 13 AC and the barbarian having a +7, that means they only need to roll a 6 or higher to hit and a 16 or higher to crit. And with that 4 extra damage they're packing on, if they crit, they're doing 8 damage with just their rage bonus alone, which is pretty massive. Then the fighter, who is you in the situation, gets to attack twice and have a lot of good benefits. This is how general teamwork is considered in the game, and it goes so much deeper than this. This is just one example that shows that just by having teamwork, you are already making it more likely for the enemy to die. And the great thing is that the fighter is providing benefits to the barbarian in this situation as well. Not only are they also flanking the enemy, making the enemy off guard to the barbarian, but if that enemy wishes to move out between the fighter and the barbarian, they'll need to either use a step action, which is a single 5-foot square movement that doesn't provoke attack of opportunities, or they're going to have to risk an attack of opportunity from the fighter, giving the fighter another strike, and attack of opportunity does not suffer from map or multi attack penalty. So they're going to be striking that enemy with their full attack bonus, and they're going to keep the off guard and frightened condition because frightened doesn't come off until the enemy's next turn. This makes it very difficult for enemies to choose what they need to do on their turn, and our poor little boggart scout here is not looking very good as far as keeping alive in this fight. This is something to keep in mind, and just know that when you're spending actions doing anything else in combat, try to do something that benefits your allies, whether it's moving into position to flank so the enemy becomes off guard, whether it's using bon mot or demoralize, or even a trip action to send the enemy to the ground. You are going to be giving your team pretty massive benefits. And it's even better when you consider fighting one more powerful enemy. All your teammates working together to drop the enemy's stats down can make what would be a very difficult encounter become only somewhat difficult and much more easy to manage. So these are the basics to understanding the game, but let me give you just a few more tips to make sure that you, or if you're a GM, your players have the most fun possible. First and foremost, item bonuses are considered in the game's general math. So the +1 potency rune, which is something you can get as early as level 2, is considered for the game's factoring into the math. As a GM, you need to make sure that your players are getting these +1 bonuses as soon as they essentially hit the level necessary for them. This is more or less easy, and they're not that expensive. The +1 bonus is, after all, only 35 gold pieces. A player can do this in most towns, and this is something that's very standard in the game. Don't consider it much a magical item as much as just it's a weapon of quality, which is something they had in first edition. It's just something to help keep your mind that this is not a very unique thing. Most weapons in the setting will probably have at least a +1 potency. The same goes for the damage dice on weapons. The striking runes as well come as early as level 3, and of course is factored into the enemy's HP when the game is, in full effect. So that being the case, if you're a GM, make sure that your players are getting the +1 or the potency runes and striking runes appropriate for their level about as soon as they can, if not a little bit earlier as a treat. And as a player, if you're noticing that the GM is not giving out these very important items, make sure they understand that the math is very much considerate of that. And if they want to make magic items more scarce, they need to balance their encounters to compensate, making enemies a little bit weaker than typical to keep the game more or less the same. That shouldn't be much of a big deal, and there are so many enemies in the game in the bestiary that you don't need to be throwing heavy hitters to give the players a challenge. This is just how the game is orientated, and a lot of people use that against Pathfinder, and it's really just not the case. You can definitely not use potency runes or fundamental runes. The balance just needs to be accounted for that. You just need to use slightly weaker enemies to, make sure that your players are on par. And even typically, you just need to reduce the enemy's level by like 1. You can use the weak modifier even if you don't like giving out free magic items freely. Another thing is the free archetype bonus roll. This is pretty standard in most home tables, even though I know it's not in your society games for Pathfinder Society, which is the public games that you can find in most game stores if you're interested in trying out Pathfinder for yourself. You can't use the free archetype there, but in most home games, free archetype is good. I will recommend don't necessarily dip directly into the multi-class free archetyping, as many of the archetypes in the game something I've made a full series on, which over 100 videos, I think, at this point. Just know the archetypes are very good and oftentimes are better than the multi-class archetypes. It's something that you very much want to keep in mind. And even in my own home games, for the free bonus archetype rule, I disallow the multi-class archetypes for that slot, but I also allow the players to use their normal class levels to use multi-class archetyping instead. There's not really a big power gain through multi-class archetyping, and instead, it only gives the players more tools. More tools that they have to sacrifice tools from their class initially to pick up. So honestly, it's not a big balance thing, and honestly, it's something I recommend everyone do just because the archetypes are more than just stats. A lot of them have a lot of flavor and can completely alter how the character approaches the game. The standard or the minor healing potion for low level players is only 4 gold pieces. The game wants you to use consumables during the game. So make sure that you stock up. All you need is about 12 gold, and you can get 3 healing potions that will more than set you up. And not only that, but the healing potions offer a D8 healing, which is pretty substantial at low levels. And even the next step up, the lesser healing potion, is only 12 gold pieces. This is probably very starkly different from D&D, where your basic healing potion was 50 gold pieces, and it's really rough. Pathfinder really wants you to use the consumables, and there are a lot. I'll soon be releasing a video of recommended starting consumable items for players who are looking to fill their pockets with helpful items and trinkets on their journey for a very minimal cost. And I think it's going to be something that's going to be very beneficial to you all. So if you want to see that video, I highly recommend you subscribe to the channel below, as it will make it more likely for you to see the video when it comes up. And if you want to go the extra distance and ring the bell so that you will guaranteed get that video when as soon as it's released, well, that's another way to do it. Or rather than ringing the bell, you can join our Discord. We're getting to close to 200 members in our personal Discord, linked in the description. And every time I make a video, you get a notification through the Discord. So if you want to chat with the many people who've joined our server, or join us for Table Talk, where we talk to the audience every Thursday, well, I recommend joining the Discord. But that's going to be it for me. Hopefully this video helped you all out. Sorry if it was a little bit longer than I kind of said it would be. There's just a lot to go over, but this is the most concise it can be done. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games, and leave the bad luck to me. I'll see you next time. Bye.